Welcome to ID the Future, a podcast about intelligent design and evolution.
Hello and welcome to the Intelligent Design the Future podcast. This is Casey Luskin broadcasting with Discovery Institute's Center for Science and Culture in Seattle, Washington. Today we're going to talk about Michael Shermer's fact-free attack on Expelled in Scientific American and how it exposes the intolerance of Darwinists towards pro-intelligent design scientists. Scientific American has a long history of opposing intelligent design, so it comes as no surprise that they have tasked their columnist, Michael Shermer, with the job of attacking the new movie Expelled, No Intelligence Allowed. Michael Shermer is the founder of Skeptic magazine, who loves to boast about how evolution liberated him from belief in God. In fact, he does just that in his article attacking Expelled, opening it by saying, quote, "In 1974, I matriculated at Pepperdine University as a born-again Christian who rejected Darwinism and evolutionary theory," unquote. But then when he, quote, "finally took a course in evolutionary biology in graduate school, I realized that I was hoodwinked," unquote. In his book, Why Darwin Matters, The Case Against Intelligent Design, Shermer tries to convince the reader that he believes that evolution and religion are compatible, but ultimately concedes that, quote, "were we to take a strictly scientific approach to the God question, we would have to reject the God hypothesis," unquote. In fact, it's tough to take Shermer's calls for peace between religion and Darwin seriously when he has elsewhere declared his view that, quote, "there is no God, intelligent designer, or anything resembling the divinity is preferred by the world's religions," unquote. Shermer is interviewed in the documentary Expelled, and he basically denies that there is any persecution of ID proponents going on. Since the film provides extensive documentation of the discrimination faced by ID proponents in the academy, Expelled disproves Shermer's one-sided skepticism. But Shermer's day job is literally being a professional skeptic. He makes a living telling people that they should be skeptical of religion. But Shermer virtually never applies his skepticism to modern evolutionary theory. This film shows that sometimes his skepticism against ID goes too far. Shermer certainly has a huge stake in the debate over this film. In fact, it seems that his entire worldview, livelihood, and deconversion experience depend heavily upon the veracity of Darwinian evolution. It therefore comes as no surprise that in his review of Expelled, he paints evolutionists as the saints and Darwinism as the pure and unadulterated religion. Shermer's general approach to handling persecution of ID proponents in his review of Expelled is one-sided skepticism, denial, and blaming the victim. Having seen Expelled, Shermer now knows that his denial that ID proponents get persecuted serves as a foil for the impressive documentation of such persecution presented throughout the film. His response is not to amend his answer in light of the facts presented in the movie, but rather to issue even more forceful denials that there is no persecution of ID proponents going on. Shermer's method of dealing with these persecution instances is as follows. 1. Ignore all the facts showing that there is persecution. 2. Email the persecutor and ask them if there was any anti-ID discrimination. 3. Withhold all skepticism from the statements of the persecutors and then trumpet their response as evidence that there is no persecution against ID proponents. Blaming the victim for losing their job and then claiming that those who feel there is persecution are just promoting a conspiracy. Shermer's record of consistently taking the side of the persecutors shows that he is part of the problem and is in no way an objective source to analyze the subject. For example, Shermer implies that Richard Sternberg's credibility is diminished because he's a fellow of the International Society for Complexity, Information, and Design, or because he is, quote, "a signature of Discovery Institute's 100 Scientists Who Doubt Darwinism statement," unquote. Of course, Shermer doesn't mention that it's over 700 scientists now, but the fact here is that Shermer shows that he himself could be a potential persecutor of Darwin skeptics because he's not interested in giving Darwin skeptics equal treatment. If only Shermer would turn some of his skepticism against the perpetrators instead of waging all of his skepticism against the victims. This is typical behavior of persecutors. Deny and blame the victim, telling them that they are merely conspiracy theorists. This unwillingness to believe the facts fits perfectly with Shermer's modus operandi, unyielding and eternal skepticism unless it supports Darwinism. Shermer's first case where he blames the victim is with Dr. Richard Sternberg. The conversation with Michael Shermer in the Expelled film revolves around the publication of Stephen C. Meyer's pro-ID peer-reviewed scientific article in the journal Proceedings for the Biological Society of Washington in 2004. The editor who oversaw the publication of that article was Dr. Richard Sternberg, who, according to investigations by both the U.S. Office of Special Counsel and also by subcommittee staff of the U.S. House of Representatives Committee on Government Reform, was subsequently harassed, intimidated, and demoted because he broke ranks with the unwritten rule among Darwinists that you must keep ID out of the journals. But here's the truth of the matter. Before Meyer's paper was published, the pro-Darwin lobby had long claimed that ID was not science because it was not in the peer-reviewed journals. But once ID was undeniably and explicitly supported in a peer-reviewed scientific journal article, the Darwinists panicked, and the National Center for Science Education, or NCSE, prompted the journal's publishing society, the Biological Society of Washington, or the BSW, to attack the paper. The BSW gladly obeyed the NCSE, issuing a statement that Meyer's paper should not have been published because ID allegedly is not science. If that doesn't sound like circular logic, consider the proof that the NCSE orchestrated the whole thing according to the findings of the subcommittee staff investigation of the U.S. House of Representatives Committee on Government Reform. Quote, early on in the controversy, the NCSE circulated a set of talking points to the BSW Council and National Museum of Natural History officials on how to discredit both Sternberg and the Meyer article. The Office of Special Counsel Investigation found that the NCSE and recommendations were circulated within the Smithsonian Institution and eventually became part of the official public response of the Smithsonian Institution in the Meyer article, unquote. To attack Meyer's article, Shermer then cites the NCSE-inspired statement from the BSW, stating that, quote, contrary to typical editorial practices, the paper was published without review by any associate editor. Sternberg handled the entire review process. The council, which includes officers, elected councilors, and past presidents, and the associate editors would have deemed the paper inappropriate for the pages of the proceedings, unquote. Shermer should have applied some of his famous skepticism here, because that statement is in fact a falsehood. Eugenie Scott herself admitted that, quote, other editors have not always referred all the articles to associate editors, and because editors justifiably have discretion, unquote, that therefore the BSW should, quote, not come down too hard on Dr. Sternberg for his errors in the procedure in accepting this article, unquote. Shermer conveniently spares the BSW from skepticism over Eugenie Scott's behind-closed-doors concession, which contradicts the BSW's public statement. Moreover, Shermer and the BSW ignored the less politicized statements. Dr. Rory McDermott, the president of the BSW and a scientist at the Smithsonian, admitted that there was no wrongdoing regarding the peer review process of Meyer's paper, as he wrote, quote, I have seen the review file and comments from the 3 reviewers on the Meyer paper, all 3 with some differences among the comments recommended or suggested publication. I was surprised but concluded that there was not inappropriate behavior vis-a-vis the review process, unquote. So the truth is that Meyer's paper was peer-reviewed, and the Darwinists have invented the claim that it was not peer-reviewed or that there was wrongdoing regarding the publication of the article. Shermer, the famous skeptic, seems unwilling to apply his skepticism to anything the Darwinists said about the situation, blindly accepting the denials from Darwinists that any discrimination against ID took place, instead blaming the victim. Shermer should just drop his attempts to defend the Smithsonian, but he doesn't, calling the attacks upon Sternberg part of Benstein's, quote, case for conspiracy, unquote. Let's review the findings of a congressional staff investigation to see if there really was any discrimination against Dr. Sternberg, or if Shermer was right, and this is all just a conspiracy inside the heads of Dr. Sternberg, Ben Stein, the U.S. Office of Special Counsel, and a bunch of people working at Congress. The congressional staff report found the following. Quote, officials at the Smithsonian's National Museum of Natural History created a hostile work environment intended to force Dr. Sternberg to resign his position as a research associate in violation of his free speech and civil rights, unquote. As NMNH officials wrote in emails, quote, I think we could call Sternberg on the phone and verbally ask him to do the right thing and resign. Or, quote, a face-to-face meeting, or at least a you're welcome to leave and resign call with this individual is in order, unquote. Or, quote, if Sternberg had any class, he would either entirely desist or resign his appointment, unquote. The report also found that, quote, in emails exchanged during August and September 2004, NMNH officials revealed their intent to use their government jobs to discriminate against scientists based upon their outside activities regarding evolution, unquote. As NMNH officials wrote in emails, quote, Sternberg is a well-established figure in anti-evolution circles, and a simple Google search would have exposed these connections, unquote. The report described a memo against Dr. Sternberg as follows. Quote, in a memo prepared on February 8, 2005, NMNH official Marilyn Schott admitted that after publication of the Meyer paper, Dr. Coddington wanted to know if Dr. Sternberg was religious. Dr. Schott further admitted, telling Coddington that Sternberg was a Republican. Schott even conceded that Coddington may have asked her whether Sternberg was, quote, a fundamentalist and whether he was a conservative, unquote. The congressional staff report also found that, quote, NMNH officials conspired with a special interest group on government time and using government emails to publicly smear Dr. Sternberg. The group was also enlisted to monitor Sternberg's outside activities in order to find a way to dismiss him, unquote. As one NMNH official wrote in an email, quote, "From now on, I will keep an eye on Dr. von Sternberg. I'd greatly like to know if you or other NCSE specialists could let me know about further activities by this gentleman in areas outside crustacean systematics," unquote. Michael Shermer apparently has unlimited skepticism when it comes to the claims of Darwin skeptics.